December 14th, 1944. Monschau Forest, Western Germany. 3:17 hours. Snow falls in slow, deliberate flakes, drifting sideways in the bitter wind that snakes between the towering firs of the Ardennes. Somewhere in the darkness, artillery, silent for days, rests like a sleeping beast. And in the middle of it all stands Oberfeldwebel Karl Riemann, his breath rising in pale clouds as he adjusts the frost-stiff strap of his MP40. He squints into the void where the forest path disappears between black trunks. To him, the forest feels unnatural tonight, too quiet, too expectant. For days, he and the men of the 326th Volksgrenadier Division have been told the same thing. The Führer has a plan to turn the war again. But Riemann has been fighting since Poland. He knows the difference between a plan and a fantasy. Behind him, the distant growl of engines vibrates through the frozen earth. Tiger II heavy tanks, monsters of steel weighing nearly 70 tons, creep forward under tarps and branches meant to break up their silhouette. Their exhaust plumes vanish quickly in the thick fog. Drivers curse softly as they navigate the rutted forest tracks. Panzer crews whisper in hushed tones, half excited, half terrified. This massive movement, men, artillery, tanks, fuel trucks, dispatch riders, should be heard from miles away. Yet the weather has conspired to help the Germans. The Ardennes is blanketed in a heavy curtain of fog and low clouds, grounding Allied reconnaissance planes and hiding the greatest concentration of German forces assembled since Kursk. Riemann turns as footsteps crunch softly behind him. Lieutenant Dieter Voigt approaches, one hand on his greatcoat, the other rubbing warmth into his face. He looks too young to have a scar on his cheek, but everyone in the division has a story now. Riemann, Voigt whispers, Colonel Gutman wants final reports. Are your squads ready? As ready as men can be, Riemann replies, scanning the dark forest. They don't like not knowing the target. Voigt exhales sharply, part laugh, part annoyance. The target is simple, Oberfeldwebel. Antwerp. Riemann's eyebrows lift. For a second, he forgets the cold. Antwerp? That's insane. That's the point, Voigt says, his voice dropping lower. Shock. Confusion. A blow straight through the Allied lines. The Führer wants to split the British and Americans apart at the seam. Riemann knows the theory. It had been whispered among the NCOs for weeks. A lightning strike through the Allied lines in Belgium. Race west. Reach Antwerp. Force a political collapse, or at least an armistice in the West. Then Germany could turn all remaining strength against the Soviets. It's a plan born from desperation, but also from Hitler's lingering belief that audacity can substitute for resources. Riemann hesitates before speaking again. Does Berlin know we don't have the fuel for something like that? The Panzers barely made it here. Voigt doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. They both know the truth. Germany is scraping the bottom of the barrel, literally and figuratively. Fuel is rationed to the last liter. Fresh divisions are Volksgrenadiers, teenagers, old men, men pulled from hospitals and factories, given new rifles and little training. And yet, the forest is filled with an energy Riemann hasn't felt in years. Purpose. Even if the hope is delusional, the belief, at least tonight, feels real that a distant clatter of metal echoes. Someone dropping a track pin. Riemann winces. Voigt bites back a curse. Tell them to keep quiet, the lieutenant whispers. If the Americans hear us, they won't, Riemann says. Not in this fog. Not with this wind. Voigt trudges back toward the command post. A shack of pine logs and tarpaulins barely visible through the murk. Lantern light glows faintly from inside, shadows shifting as senior officers move around a makeshift map table. Runners dart in and out wearing thick gloves, carrying folded messages stamped Geheime Kommandosake, top secret. But among the officers inside, one man stands apart. General Feldmarschall Walter Model, the Führer's fireman, bends over the map, tracing his fingers along the narrow roads threading through the Ardennes. His round spectacles catch the lamplight. Outside, soldiers fear him. Inside, officers respect him. He is brilliant, ruthless, and unforgiving, that he also knows, better than anyone in this forest, that Germany is nearing collapse. Model taps a finger on a tiny symbol on the map, one representing an American outpost near Losheim Gap. Here, he mutters to his chief of staff. Here is where we must break them first. If this doesn't fall quickly, everything else unravels. His chief of staff nods grimly. The Führer insists the plan will succeed. Model's lips tighten. The Führer insists on many things. A heavy silence settles. For a moment, the distant rumble of engines seems louder, as if the panzer divisions themselves are listening. Outside, a column of Fallschirmjäger trudges past Riemann, their boots kicking up soft puffs of snow. They move silently, weapons wrapped in cloth to prevent reflection. Some hold bicycles, bizarre tools for a winter offensive, but terrain here favors anything light and fast that a young paratrooper approaches Riemann, whispering excitedly. Is it true? Are we really going to smash through the Americans? Take Antwerp. Riemann looks at the boy, a face too smooth for war, eyes that haven't yet seen horror. Yes, he says finally. That's the plan. He doesn't have the heart to say more. The boy hurries after his unit, energized, hopeful. Riemann watches him vanish into the darkness and wonders how many of them will survive the first day. Above the forest canopy, the sky is a sheet of unbroken gray. The weather report says the fog will last at least 3 more days. Perfect cover. Perfect silence. Perfect blindness for the enemy. At T-329, a whistle shrieks from somewhere ahead. A signal. Riemann stiffens. Voigt emerges from the tree line, snow on his shoulders. Orders from division headquarters, he says. H-hour confirmed. Riemann's stomach tightens. When? Voigt's voice comes out like a breath of frost. 2 hours from now. 05:30. The Ardennes offensive begins. For a heartbeat, neither man speaks. Then, as if on cue, the forest around them begins to shift. Men tightening straps, clearing frost from rifle bolts, loading belts in MG-42s, checking fuses on bundled grenades. It feels like watching an entire army exhale after holding its breath for weeks. Riemann listens to the distant rumble of the first artillery batteries rolling into firing position. He whispers under his breath, "God, hilf uns. God help us. Because if this gamble fails, as many quietly fear, it will not just be a lost battle, that it will be the end." December 16th, 1944. Ardennes front. 5:27 hours. The forest holds its breath. A low hum, felt more than heard, rolls through the frozen ground, vibrating up through boots and bone. Men shift uneasily in their foxholes and along the tree line. Riemann presses a gloved hand against the cold bark of a fir tree, listening. The humming grows, deepens, thickens. It is the sound of thousands of artillery pieces unlocking their fury all at once. T-530 on the second, precise tick. The night explodes, a blinding flash tears across the horizon, followed by a thunderous roar so immense it feels like the earth itself is cracking open. The Germans unleash more than 1,500 guns, 88s, Nebelwerfers, heavy howitzers, firing in tightly coordinated salvos. A wall of sound slams through the forest, rattling branches, kicking loose avalanches of snow, shaking men to their core. Führer free. Officers shout into radios and megaphones. Fire at will. The first shells arc through the air, shrieking like banshees before slamming into American lines around Monschau, St. Vith, and Elsenborn Ridge. Explosions blossom in rapid succession. White fire and black smoke lighting the pre-dawn darkness. Snow bursts upward as if the ground is being shredded by invisible claws. The Americans, scattered under strength and unprepared, have no idea this storm was coming. Inside a shallow foxhole, Private First Class William Hardy of the U.S. 99th Infantry Division clutches his steel helmet with both hands as the earth convulses. "Jesus Christ," he yells, though no one can hear him. The bombardment goes on, relentless, rolling west in carefully timed waves meant to cut telephone lines, destroy forward positions, and disorient the enemy before the infantry even moves. Riemann and Voigt advance through the trees with their lead assault platoons, the artillery thunder growing behind them as batteries adjust and fire again. Men speak only in gestures. Voices would be swallowed by the roar anyway. Ahead, visibility is barely 10 meters. Fog curls low across the forest floor, mixing with drifting smoke from burning American supply dumps already hit by lucky strikes. The air tastes of cordite and frost. Rows of Volksgrenadiers move forward like phantoms, their silhouettes wraith-like in the murk. Riemann glances back at Voigt, whose normally steady hands tremble slightly. Whether from cold or anticipation, no one can say. Then, cutting through the rumble, advance. Schnell. The offensive has begun. Across the front line, chaos floods American positions. The PFC Hardy scrambles out of his foxhole as an explosion knocks loose a rain of splintered wood. His squad sergeant, Staff Sergeant Mitchell, shouts something drowned out by another detonation. Hardy sees the sky flash again. Move! Move! Mitchell bellows, pulling Hardy by the collar. They're shelling our whole sector. A tree trunk, thick as a man's torso, snaps like a twig under a direct hit. The upper half crashes down in a shower of needles and branches. Men dive for cover as debris scatters. To Hardy, it feels impossible. The Ardennes was supposed to be quiet, a quiet sector for resting troops, not a killing ground. But that illusion is dead. Mitchell grabs his radio operator. Get battalion! Now! The operator tries. Static hisses. The line is dead. Mitchell curses under his breath. They've cut us off. Christ almighty, this is big. Hardy looks at him, terrified. What do we do? Mitchell steadies himself before answering. We hold. That's what we do. But in his eyes, Hardy sees doubt. Raw, unhidden doubt. By 6 o'clock. As the artillery finally tapers off, German assault troops slam into the first American positions. Machine guns chatter. Grenades thump. The winter dawn remains a gray smear behind the fog. Riemann's platoon advances at a crouch. Boots crunching softly in the snow. An MG-42 team sets up behind a fallen log. The gunner mounts the barrel with practice speed, checking the belt feed. Nodding once. Bright, he says. Ready. Voigt signals toward a small ridge ahead. The first American outpost on their path. Shadows move beyond the sandbags. A faint voice carries through the still shaking air. I swear I heard engines. Riemann gives the hand signal. The MG-42 erupts. Flashes strove from the muzzle, each burst ripping through the fog. The gun's furious snarl echoes across the ridge. American silhouettes dive for cover. Shouts erupt. Rifles fire blindly into the haze. Riemann's men move in fast, flanking left through a thicket of spruce. A bar opens fire from the American line, bullets snapping through branches above Riemann's head. He hits the ground instantly, snow puffing around him. Voigt! Suppress the right flank. Riemann shouts. Voigt throws a smoke grenade, pale white clouds spilling across the ridge. Under its cover, a squad of Volksgrenadiers charges forward, hurling stick grenades. Explosions kick up showers of dirt and snow. Riemann gets to his knees, fires a burst from his MP-40, moves again. The Americans fight back hard, harder than expected. But they are isolated, communications severed, and they are outnumbered. Within minutes, the ridge is overrun. American survivors retreat deeper into the forest. Riemann stands over a shattered machine gun nest, breathing hard. His coat is flecked with mud and snow. Voigt joins him, wincing as he rubs his shoulder. That's one, Riemann says, though he feels no pride. Only exhaustion. Voigt's smile is thin. The colonel will want faster. Riemann knows he's right. The entire offensive hinges on speed. Speed Germany no longer truly possesses. Fuel shortages, narrow roads, and winter conditions will slow everything. Still, in these first hours, the German advance feels unstoppable. Panzer engines rumble closer as heavy tanks approach the cleared ridge. Their massive silhouettes loom like beasts breaking through the mist. Crew hatches open. Commanders stand tall, scanning ahead with binoculars. Behind them, Columns of infantry surge past, stepping over discarded American helmets, broken crates, and the blackened remains of ammunition bunkers. A young Volksgrenadier, no older than 17, pauses next to Riemann. Is this it? He asks breathlessly. Are we really breaking through? Riemann doesn't answer immediately. The fog shifts, revealing the faint glow of distant fires, the echo of gunshots, the rumbling of tanks pushing deeper into Belgium. He forces a nod, for now. But even in this early moment of momentum, he feels a cold truth settling in his gut. The Americans are giving ground, but not collapsing. Not yet. And far to the south, along the roads choked with tanks and half-tracks, German commanders are already discovering the first cracks in Hitler's grand design. Cracks that, in time, will rip the offensive apart. December 16th, 1944. South of Losheim Gap, 7:42 hours. Morning light never truly rises in the Ardennes today. It's a dim, gray smear filtered through fog, smoke, and drifting snow. Barely enough illumination to see 30 meters ahead, but the roads are awake. Engines grind. Tracks clatter. Men shout over the mechanical roar as the spearhead divisions push west. The air stinks of gasoline, exhaust, wet wool, and cordite. Dozens of German armored columns funnel into narrow, forest roads. Roads never meant for this many vehicles, this much ambition. Oberfeldwebel Karl Riemann marches alongside his platoon, hugging the tree while tanks crawl past on the rutted track. A massive Tiger II growls by, its immense weight making the ground vibrate. Frost clings to its sloped armor, giving it the appearance of a beast carved from ice. The commander standing in the hatch taps his helmet at Riemann. "Keep up," he shouts. "If we're to reach St. Vith by nightfall, no delays." Riemann gives a salute, masking his doubt. St. Vith by nightfall. It's an objective even the most optimistic officers whispered about only cautiously. The Americans were surprised, yes, but they weren't fools. They would defend the crossroads towns with everything they had. And St. Vith, critical to the entire German timetable, would be no exception. Behind him, Lieutenant Voigt trudges through the slush, face flushed from cold and adrenaline. "They're pushing the armor too hard," he mutters. "No recon, no spacing. It's a traffic jam waiting to happen." "It already is a traffic jam," Riemann says quietly. They step aside as another column of half-track screeches to a halt, horns blaring. Engineers run past carrying shovels and planks. The road ahead has become a quagmire of churned mud and ice, broken by the weight of the heavy tanks. "Get those chains down. Move, move." A Panzer sergeant bellows. NCO from the Volksgrenadiers shouts back in frustration. "We're trying." The mud is a meter deep. Riemann watches, jaw tight. These delays aren't minor. They're catastrophic. The entire offensive depends on momentum, on reaching the Meuse River before the Allies can react. Every minute lost now is a minute the Americans use to regroup, and they are regrouping. Distant gunfire echoes from the hills. American artillery, slow to respond during the first hours, has begun to find its voice. Shells burst in dull thumps somewhere to the northwest, their sound swallowed by fog, but unmistakable. Voigt pulls out his field map, shielding it from snow under his coat. "Our axis of advance is supposed to meet up with Camp Grupp Paper by midday," he says, "assuming they break through the same as us." Riemann glances at the map but sees only a web of forest roads, villages, and choke points. "Supposing," he replies, "is the problem." Meanwhile, kilometers ahead, where the fog thins slightly over open farmland, a column of American M8 armored cars limps towards St. Vith. The 14th Cavalry Group, outnumbered and overwhelmed, has been falling back steadily since the attack began. Inside one armored car, Lieutenant Paul Brenner wipes a streak of condensation from the periscope lens. "How many did we lose?" he asks his driver. "Hard to say," the driver answers. "Radar station's gone. CP's gone. Half our radios are fried. We got hit hard." Brenner clenches his jaw. He had assumed the German attack was a spoiling raid, a spike of resistance before the inevitable collapse of the Reich. But this is coordinated, massive, terrifying. He raises the radio handset. This is Black Eagle 3. We're falling back to St. Vith. Enemy forces are static swallows the rest. The lines are still unstable. The Germans cut most of the cables overnight with saboteurs and shelling. Brenner bangs the radio with his palm. Come on, come on. St. Vith needs to know we're coming in hot. He finally catches a signal. Eagle 3? Say again. Enemy armor. Repeat. Armor. Brenner shouts into the mic, yes. Armor. Tigers, Panthers, mechanized infantry, an entire assault group. Silence. Then the voice returns, shaken. Understood. Defensive positions are being prepared now. God help us. Back on the German side, by mid-morning, Riemann and Voigt march past a wrecked American roadblock. Burned-out jeeps, smashed crates, and twisted metal litter the ditch. A Panther tank stands nearby, its cannons still smoking. The commander leans out, waving Riemann over. Roads clear ahead, he says. Small enemy recon unit. They fell back fast. Voigt nods. Good. We need every kilometer. But Riemann kneels beside a dead American soldier, perhaps 20 years old. Snow collects gently on the man's jacket. His hands are still wrapped around the straps of a broken radio. War has become something mechanical. Push forward, neutralize resistance, move again. But moments like this remind Riemann of what is truly happening. Behind the Panther, a line of supply trucks tries to advance. But they're already running low on fuel that a sergeant shouts from one truck. Where's the fuel depot? We were told there'd be captured American fuel. Voigt grimaces. This early? They're already short. Riemann says nothing. But the fear forming in his chest grows heavier. Hitler's plan depends not only on surprise, but on capturing American fuel dumps. Clean, plentiful. The Wehrmacht can't drive to Antwerp on hope alone. Keep moving, officers shout. Road must be secured east of St. Vith. But the delays keep coming to the bridge collapses under the weight of a Tiger. The Panther slides into a ditch and blocks traffic for 20 minutes. An entire battalion waits for engineers to clear a minefield the Americans laid weeks ago and almost forgot existed to be Y noon. The timetable is ruined. T. St. Vith itself. The defenders are digging in. General Bruce Clark of the U.S. 7th Armored Division arrives at the command post, mud splattered across his coat. He surveys the map quickly, stabbing a finger toward the Losheim Gap. They're coming fast. We hold St. Vith, or the whole damned river line unravels. His staff officers nod grimly. Clark looks at the young liaison officer beside him. Get word to General Jones. Tell him this town is the cork in the bottle. If it pops, everything spills. Outside, American engineers lay mines across the approaches. Tank destroyers take hull-down positions behind hedgerows. Infantry string wire across the streets. The town hums with tension, with fear, with determination. The Germans are coming, but St. Vith will not fall easily as afternoon creeps in. Riemann's platoon halts again. Far ahead, artillery thunders. American guns this time. Voigt lowers his binoculars, face dark. They're organizing a defense. Not collapsing, organizing. Riemann removes his helmet, wipes sweat from his brow despite the cold. They were surprised this morning, he says. They won't be surprised tonight. Voigt nods grimly, and behind them, though neither man yet knows it, other German spearheads face even greater delays and even fiercer resistance. The offensive has started with stunning brutality, but already the first cracks in Hitler's grand gamble are widening. December 16th, 1944, near Hansfeld, Belgium, 14-18 hours. The fog thins as the day drags toward afternoon, revealing a grim, torn landscape. Pine trees stand like skeletal guardians along the road, their branches dusted in snow and ash. Smoke coils upward from burning American jeeps and smashed half-tracks. Wreckage that marks the path of Germany's most feared armored unit. Kampfgruppe paper 8T, its head rumbles a column of Panzerkampfwagen 6 Osf. B. Tiger II heavy tanks, their massive barrels pointed forward like battering rams. Behind them, rows of Panthers SD, KFC half-tracks, motorcycle scouts, and dreaded flak half-tracks form a steel serpent winding through the Belgian countryside. In the lead half-track stands Standard for Joachim paper, his black leather coat catching flakes of falling snow. Paper surveys the road ahead with a blend of confidence and irritation. His orders are clear: break through to the Meuse, cut deep, advance faster than any Allied response. But the timetable is already bleeding minutes. And for Paper, every minute is a needle under the skin that he signals to his adjutant. We lost the morning, Paper growls. We do not lose the afternoon. The adjutant nods, shouting to the column, maximum speed, push on. The engines roar louder, echoing across the open fields. Minutes later, the column rolls into Hansfeld. And what they find shocks even veteran panzer crews. American vehicles everywhere, parked abandoned, idling at a maintenance depot in chaos. Fuel trucks with hoses still attached. Rows of sleeping tents, emptied in panic. The 99th and 14th Cavalry had fled so quickly that some stoves were still burning. Soup still simmering. Paper smirks. So the Americans can run, he mutters. German infantry sweep through the village, disarming shaken medics and supply clerks. A few sporadic shots echo from the far end of town, quickly silenced by MG-42 fire. Within minutes, the village is under German control. Then Paper sees what he wanted most: fuel barrels. Jerrycans, trucks filled to the brim. Liquid gold. He steps down from the half-track, brushing snow off his gloves. Refuel everything, he orders. We move immediately. But as mechanics scramble to siphon the captured gasoline into German tanks, Paper's radio officer calls out, Herr Standartenführer, weather update from 1st SS Panzer Corps. Paper grabs the handset. Speak. Fog expected to hold. Allied aircraft grounded for at least another 24 hours. Paper's jaw sets. Good. Very good. Aircraft were the one thing he feared. Allied J-bows, fighter bombers, had turned panzer advances into rolling coffins before. But today, the sky belongs to no one. Paper intends to use that advantage until the clouds burn off. That he looks out over the captured supply depot. German soldiers scour it like starving wolves, dragging crates of rations, ammunition, and clothing toward their vehicles. A Tiger II guzzles gasoline, its engine coughing before settling into a deep, powerful rumble. Then Paper's expression darkens, because not everything here is to his advantage. On the west side of Hansfeld lie the bodies of American soldiers, cut down while trying to retreat. Some have their hands raised, riddled with bullets. Others lie face down in the snow, helmets scattered. Paper's adjutant returns, face pale. There are reports, he hesitates, that some of our men executed prisoners. Paper's eyes narrow, not in moral outrage, but in cold calculation. He knows what such actions could mean if the offensive fails. Despite his reputation as a ruthless commander, Paper understands war crimes attract consequences, especially if the right collapses. That he answers quietly. Get everyone back in the vehicles. Now, we cannot linger. By 1500 hours, Kampfgruppe Paper roars west again. The column speeds through fields and farm roads, passing stunned Belgian civilians who dive into ditches as tanks thunder past. Some panzer crews shout warnings. Others fire shots into the air for sport. Discipline is fraying. Excitement is morphing into brutality. Riemann's platoon, marching miles behind Paper's route, hears the distant thunder of his engines but won't see the column until later. For now, Riemann and Voigt slog through a muddy farm lane choked with another division's supply wagons. We're falling behind, Voigt mutters. Paper's making better time. Riemann shakes his head. Paper has tanks. We have boots. Voigt looks at the congested road. Infantry crammed shoulder to shoulder, horses hauling ammunition carts, fuel trucks trapped behind artillery pieces trying to negotiate tight turns. This isn't an offensive, Voigt says bitterly. It's a parade gone wrong. Riemann doesn't disagree. Suddenly, boomed at a distant explosion echoes from the west, followed by another. Then automatic gunfire rattles like tearing canvas. Voigt snaps his head up. Sounds like Paper hit resistance. Riemann listens. Not much. Maybe a roadblock. But it's more than that. Kilometers ahead, Paper's lead tanks come under fire from a handful of American engineers holding crossroads. The Americans fight desperately, firing bazookas, planting mines, trying to buy even 5 minutes. Paper orders them crushed under the treads. When the dust settles, the path is clear, but several German half-tracks are burning. A Tiger II sits immobilized with a busted transmission. Precious time is lost. Again, Paper slams his fist against the side of his half-track. Move. We must reach Lignaville before nightfall. But darkness comes quickly in winter, and with it shadows of American defenders converging on the roads ahead. Near Stavelot, 1722 hours, as evening falls, Paper's column reaches another fuel dump, or what should have been a fuel dump. Instead, the Americans torch it. Flames roar skyward, turning the snow orange. Fuel barrels detonate, sending shock waves through the streets. Soot rains down like black snow. Paper curses savagely. Burned? They burn it all. They're denying us fuel, his adjutant confirms. Paper stares into the inferno, the heat stinging his face. Without fuel, the offensive dies. Without fuel, his tanks become metal coffins. Behind him, the Tiger commander mutters, "The Americans are learning." Paper hates the truth of it. Far behind, on a ridge overlooking the burning valley, Riemann and Voigt spot the towering flames. "What is that?" Voigt asks. Riemann raises his binoculars. "A fuel depot. Burning." Voigt's breath catches in his throat. "That's catastrophic." Riemann lowers the glasses slowly. "It's worse than that," he says. "It means the Americans know exactly what we need most." The snow glows red from the fire's reflection. The German offensive, though still deadly, is bleeding momentum. And every unit, Paper's, Riemann's, all of them, can feel the shift beginning. What started as a lightning strike is becoming a struggle against time, fuel, terrain, and growing American resolve. December 19th, 1944. Near St. Vith, Belgium. 04:42 hours. Snow drifts sideways in the pre-dawn dark, carried by a biting wind that rasps across the frozen treetops of the Ardennes. Headlights stab weakly through the murk as a column of German half-tracks grind along a narrow forest road. Chains rattling, engines groaning, exhaust coughing thick plumes into the freezing air. Inside the lead vehicle, Hauptmann Erich Durr, commander of a reconnaissance company under 58th Panzer Corps, cups his gloved hands near a sputtering metal heater. His breath forms a pale cloud as he leans toward the windshield, trying to make out more than a few meters of the icy path ahead. Visibility is nothing, his driver mutters, knuckles white on the steering wheel. If there's a bend, a ditch, a mine, there is no room for hesitation, Durr replies quietly. Not today. They all know the truth. The offensive's momentum hangs on minutes. On roads like this, and weather like this. Every delay is a nail driven deeper into Germany's coffin. The radio crackles. A distant, tinny voice cuts through the static. Off Clarence-Gruptere, the Americans have fortified St. Vith. Resistance heavier than expected. Corps Command requests immediate pressure. Durr closes his eyes. Of course they do. St. Vith, key crossroads, key lifeline, key problem. Without it, the German timetable collapses, and deep down, in the silence between the wind gusts and the engine strain, he feels the creeping fear every officer is now trying to suppress. The plan is already slipping that a few kilometers west, the U.S. 7th Armored Division is digging in. Bulldozers grind through frozen soil. Soldiers hack shallow foxholes. Artillery crews wipe snow from M2 howitzers, fingers numb as they ram shells into breaches. American radios flood the airwaves with overlapping transmissions. Reports of paratroopers dropped behind lines, tanks spotted on the road from Losheim to Recht, infantry pushing through the woods like phantoms. The German attack was supposed to be a lightning strike, but instead, it has become a grinding, frigid contest over every road, every ridge, every cluster of pines. 07:10 hours, command post of the 6th Panzer Army. Somewhere near Blankenheim, a draft whistles through a cracked window as Oberstgruppenführer Joseph Sepp Dietrich, commander of the vaunted 6th Panzer Army, stands hunched over a map spread across a makeshift wooden table. His officers hover nearby, boots caked with slush, greatcoats dripping from the constant snowfall. American resistance is stiffening in every sector. An aide reports, voice strained. Our armor cannot move. The fog has grounded the Luftwaffe. Fuel shortages are. Dietrich slams a fist on the table. I told Hitler this sector wasn't suitable for tanks. He didn't listen. The room falls silent, the kind of silence only a war-weary staff can produce, equal parts fear and fatigue. Orders? Another officer asks cautiously. Dietrich's jaw clenches. We push on, he says. We must. But inside, beneath the bluster, even he feels the shape of the truth forming like ice in his gut. The breakthrough that was promised will not come. The armored spearheads were supposed to slice through American lines in hours. Instead, they're stuck in the mud, the snow, the congestion, or immobilized for lack of fuel. The Great Winter Offensive now resembles a slow-motion disaster. 10:35 hours. The northern shoulder Elsenborn ridge, the fog lifts just enough to reveal the silhouettes of German soldiers creeping through the woods. Rifles tucked close. MG-42 teams moving low and fast between tree trunks. Snow crunches beneath their boots, far too loud in the harsh stillness of the ridge that a mortar round whistles overhead. Then another. Explosions erupt along the tree line as American gunners, well entrenched, well supplied, begin tearing the advancing formations apart. Behind an overturned sled of ammunition, Feldwebel Kurt Heisler hugs the frozen earth, heart pounding as bark and snow spray across his helmet. Forward, his lieutenant shouts. The ridge must fall, but Heisler knows the truth. The ridge won't fall. Not today. Not tomorrow. The Americans are dug in too deep. Their artillery is too precise. Their supply lines stretch eastward, not westward. And every hour they only get stronger. He watches another wave of infantry sprint toward the American positions, only to be cut down before they reach halfway. The bodies lie still against the snow, like ink spills on white parchment. The Ardennes offensive was sold to them as the attack that would change the course of the war. Yet here on Elsenborn Ridge, it feels less like a bold stroke and more like the last convulsion of a dying army. 14:00 hours. Malmedy sector, a column of Panzer IVs crawls up a steep incline. Their turrets swivel awkwardly, scanning for movement. Ice coats their tracks. The engines overheat under the strain of frozen fuel lines. Inside one of the tanks, Unteroffizier Franz Bauer, gunner of the second vehicle, wipes condensation from his periscope lens. Sweat trickles down his neck despite the cold. How far until contact? He asks. 2 kilometers, the commander replies. If the Americans haven't blown the road again. They probably have. Engineers on both sides wage a secret war. Bridges destroyed, crossings mined, roads cratered. Every obstruction costs the Germans hours they cannot spare. As they round a bend, an explosion rips through the air. The lead tank erupts, flames bursting from its hatches. Shrapnel clatters against Bauer's armor. Ambush, someone shouts. American tank destroyers, hidden in the hills, begin firing again. Bauer's commander yells. Traverse left. Engage. Bauer swings the turret. Snow blasts across the optics. He squeezes the trigger. The cannon bucks. The shell arcs toward the hillside, detonating in a spray of earth and pine needles. But the Americans are dug in deep, and the Germans, with dwindling shells, dwindling fuel, dwindling hope, are bleeding momentum by the hour. 18:22 hours. German High Command forward HQ. The sky darkens to charcoal as dusk creeps over the forest. Inside a frigid farmhouse converted into a command post, the atmosphere is suffocating. Radio operators relay grim updates. Combat engineers can't clear the roadblocks at Recht. 2nd SS Panzer lost another bridge. American artillery is relentless. Fuel convoy bombed south of Bulge. Gaps widening between our infantry and armor. St. Vith still holds. General Otto von Manchefeld, head of the 5th Panzer Army, rubs his temples as he listens. The officers around him shift uneasily, glancing at one another, waiting for someone to say what they're all thinking. T last. Manchefeld exhales, breath fogging in the cold air. This offensive, he says softly. It is no longer an offensive. It is a gamble. A desperate gamble. A younger officer whispers. The Führer still believes we'll reach Antwerp. Manchufel meets his gaze, eyes tired, voice almost a whisper. Then he no longer sees reality. The words hang in the room like a death sentence. Outside, the wind screeches through the broken shutters of the farmhouse, sounding eerily like distant artillery. 21:10 hours. Somewhere near Lignaville night, patrols move like shadows across snow-covered fields. The temperature drops sharply. Soldiers huddle in foxholes, breath steaming, rifles clutched close, listening for movement in the dark. And in that frozen silence, you can feel it, an invisible shift in the air. The initial shock of the German offensive has passed. The Americans have stabilized. The clock is ticking against the Reich, and deep within the ranks, from foot soldiers in the woods to the highest generals bent over fading maps, the same grim realization is setting in. The Ardennes offensive is no longer a path to victory. It is the beginning of the end. December 20th, 1944, St. Vith, Belgium. 05:58 hours. The first shells land as dawn struggles to pierce the winter sky. They fall with a blunt, percussive violence. Thump, thump, throwing up fountains of snow, earth, and shattered slate. The sleepy crossroads town of St. Vith, small and unremarkable in peacetime, now shakes under German artillery fire meant to blow it open like a locked gate. Inside a bomb-blackened building on the western edge of town, Lieutenant Colonel William Hogue, commander of Combat Command B, 7th Armored Division, braces himself against the trembling wall. Dust rains from the ceiling. A map flutters on the table behind him. Tell the men we hold, Hogue says, adjusting his helmet. I don't care what's coming. We hold. Outside, Sherman tanks grind forward into position, tracks clanking on frozen cobblestone, engines rumbling in the cold air. Infantrymen in white camouflage smocks hustle between buildings, their boots crunching on ice-littered pavement as they reinforce firing lines, string telephone wire, and drag ammunition crates into ruined shops. They know the Germans are coming. They know the town cannot fall. Because St. Vith is not simply a patch of ground, it is the hinge on which the entire northern half of the German offensive will turn, or break. 06:41 hours. Eastern approach to St. Vith had dense fog blankets the valley as. German infantry advance through the low ground, rifles raised, breath steaming. Behind them, the silhouettes of armored vehicles push forward, gray hulks moving like beasts through the morning mist. Inside a camouflaged observation post, Captain Alaric Kienel, artillery observer of the 18th Volksgrenadier Division, scans the American perimeter through field glasses. St. Vith is dug in deeper than expected, his sergeant mutters. Everything is deeper than expected. Kienel replies that he signals his forward batteries. Fire mission. Concentrate on the crossroads. Moments later, the German guns roar. But even as shells rain down, one thing becomes painfully clear to the men of the Volksgrenadiers. The Americans are not collapsing like the reports promised. Their lines bend, but they do not break. And the German timetable, already fraying, is nearing irreparable disaster. 10:15 hours. American lines. Western sector snow falls heavier now. Thick flakes drifting down through the ruins, muting the world into a dim gray hush. In a shattered storefront turned aid station, medics kneel beside a wounded corporal, their gloved hands red to the wrists. Outside, a machine gun team adjusts their M1919 atop a mound of rubble, scanning for movement beyond the smoke-choked streets. Armor column approaching from the east, a runner yells. Shermans rumble into motion, barrels turning toward the narrow road leading into the town's industrial quarter. American tank destroyers take hull-down positions behind debris piles, their crews whispering last-minute instructions. The 5 parts point, 3 German Panthers emerge. The firefight is immediate and brutal. Steel on steel, smoke pouring over the snow, tracer rounds stitching fiery lines across the white fields. One Panther takes a hit to its side armor, slews sideways, and erupts in orange flame. Another returns fire, shredding a Sherman's turret ring, sending the tank crew scrambling out into the cold. The battle becomes a grinding, hour-by-hour contest. Neither side yields, but the Americans have dug in like granite. And with every German delay, Hitler's plan loses oxygen. 13:10 hours. German 5th Panzer Army forward HQ in a forest clearing sheltered by snow-covered pines. A tent serves as the temporary nerve center of General Otto von Manschaufel's 5th Panzer Army. IT is warmer here than the front, heated by oil stoves. Maps spread across tables. Radio operators sending out frantic updates. But the atmosphere is no less grim. Manschauffel stands rigid, hands clasped behind his back, as staff officers outline the situation at St. Vith. American armor is reinforcing more quickly than anticipated, an aide says, pointing to a cluster of arrows on the map. We cannot break them without the 116th Panzer Division. And the 116th is where? Manschauffel asks, delayed north of Schönberg. Fuel issues, blown bridges, resistance, everything, sir. Everything. That single word summarizes the offensive. Every division is slowed by something but a roadblock, but a lack of fuel. Unexpected American resistance, weather that won't clear, timetables that disintegrate once exposed to combat reality. Manschauffel exhales, his breath fogging as if the cold air itself were judging the failing plan. St. Vith must fall, he says. If it doesn't, the corridor closes. His aide hesitates. And if we cannot take it, Manschaufel's jaw tightens. Then we have already lost. He doesn't say the rest aloud. And Hitler has doomed all of us. 17:40 hours. St. Vith's southern outskirts as the sun sinks behind the Ardennes hills. The sky fades into a dark, iron gray. German artillery intensifies, hammering the American perimeter with relentless precision. Buildings collapse. Telephone lines snap. Men dive for cover. Snow bursts upward with every impact. Despite it all, the Americans fight on. Inside a Sherman tank position behind a collapsed barn, Sergeant Don Riker, loader, slams another shell into the breach. Up, he shouts, the gun fires. The tank shudders. Smoke fills the turret's tight interior. Another Panther's backing off, the gunner says. Riker wipes sweat from his brow despite the freezing cold. They're testing us. Again. And they will test them all night, and the next day, and the next. St. Vith stands like a rock in the river of the German advance. A rock the Reich cannot circumvent. 19:55 hours. German commanders meeting. A farmhouse in the dark, a single lantern illuminates the faces of Dietrich, Manschauffel, and their senior officers as they stand around a frost-covered table, steam rising from their damp coats. Their expressions tell the story long before the words are spoken. St. Vith is holding. The German timetables have shattered. The window to reach the Meuse is closing rapidly. Dietrich slams the table with an open palm. Hitler promised air support. Clear skies. Speed. None of it is real. Manschauffel answers quietly. We must face what is real. The room goes silent. What is real? That the Ardennes offensive is already off the rails. That every hour St. Vith holds is an hour closer to total German failure. That even if the SS or the Volksgrenadiers break through, it will be too late. The final gamble is faltering. And the generals, unable to say it in front of Hitler, know in their bones. 22:30 hours. St. Vith. Deep into the night, searchlights cut through drifting snow. The crack of rifles echoes in alleyways. The distant thud of artillery rumbles like thunder. American engineers race to reinforce new lines. Tank crews warm their engines for the next assault. Infantry rotate in and out of foxholes, faces numb, eyes hollow but determined. The men are exhausted, but they will not yield. And in that refusal, the fate of Hitler's grand offensive is sealed. St. Vith has not fallen. St. Vith will not fall. And the dream of slicing through the Ardennes, crossing the Meuse, and seizing Antwerp dies a slow death here, street by street, hour by hour. The Reich has staked everything on one throw of the dice, and the dice are coming up cold. December 21st, 1944, near La Gleize, Belgium. 04:12 hours. The snow comes down in thick, swirling sheets as engines rumble in the dark. The spearhead of camped grub paper, once the pride of the 6th Panzer Army's armored thrust, now crawls along narrow Belgian roads like a wounded animal. Inside the lead Tiger II, Assessobersturmbannführer Joachim, Paper wipes frost from the periscope lens. His face is gaunt from sleepless nights, jaw clenched as he scans the road ahead. "Fuel status?" he asks without turning to the voice answers from behind him. "Sir, critical. We can proceed only a few more kilometers at current consumption." Paper grinds his teeth. Fuel, always fuel. The bane of every German armor division in the winter of 1944, he leans forward again, eyes narrowing at the faint silhouette of a burned-out truck in the road ahead. Another obstacle. Another delay. Another reminder that the grand plan, the clean arrow thrusting westward toward the Meuse, is dead in the snow. Behind him, through the static of the radio, a voice crackles. American resistance increasing. Roadblocks at every junction. Paper mutters under his breath. They were never supposed to recover this fast. But they have. And his once unstoppable column is bleeding momentum, men, and fuel at a rate that frightens even him. 0.06:30 hours. Stavelot Bridge. A steel bridge spans the icy Amblev River, wind howling across its girders like a mournful siren. At the western end, American engineers scramble, placing charges, preparing one more demolition that might slow the German advance. But Paper's men appear first. MG-42s roar to life, cutting down the forward American elements before they can ignite the charges. Grenadiers rush the span, firing across the riverbanks in a brutal, close-range clash that ends only when the U.S. defenders fall back into the outskirts of town. Paper arrives minutes later, boots splashing in icy puddles as he strides across the captured bridge. His adjutant approaches cautiously. "The Americans nearly destroyed it. But they didn't," Paper replies. "Which means we move." He knows this bridge is more than steel and bolts. It is the last fragile thread connecting his spearhead to the main German advance. If it had fallen, Paper's entire Kampfgruppe would have been trapped east of the river. One more disaster avoided. But not for long. 0.09:20 hours. Inside, Stavel American artillery begins pounding the streets, shells bursting against rooftops and sending rubble clattering into the snow. Paper's men move through the debris-choked town, clearing houses, tossing grenades down stairwells, engaging in vicious room-to-room fighting. Flames lick up the sides of wooden homes. Thick black smoke billows into the sky, mixing with falling snow in a surreal, choking haze. Paper surveys the carnage, the sharp crack of rifle fire echoing through the streets. His men are exhausted, bloodied, running low on ammunition. But they keep pushing, because the plan demands it, because Hitler demands it, because every soldier in the SS has been told, reach the Meuse or die trying. Yet as Paper looks westward through the smoke, he sees only more roadblocks, more ambushes, and the creeping, inevitable truth. The Meuse is a dreamed fantasy dissolving in fire and snow. 11:43 hours. Malmedy Road. North of Lignaville, a column of German half-tracks creeps along a forest road, branches slapping there. Armor. Suddenly, the woods erupt. American anti-tank guns fire from concealed positions. Bazooka teams unleash rockets from behind snowy mounds. Thompson gunfire rattles through the trees. The Paper's men scramble for cover as shells punch through half-tracks, sending flames streaking into the sky. The ambush is expertly laid and devastatingly precise. Paper leaps from his vehicle, pistol drawn, shouting orders. Push forward. Break them. But there is no clean breakthrough. Only bodies in the snow, burning vehicles, and the horrified realization that the Americans are learning, adapting, faster than any German commander dared imagine. Within minutes, the road is blocked by wreckage. Paper orders a withdrawal. The men look at him, stunned. Kampfgruppe retreats. One asks. Paper snaps back. We reposition. There is no retreat. But as they fall back through the woods, leaving smoldering wrecks behind, the truth is undeniable. The Americans have seized the initiative, and Paper, once the vanguard, is now a hunted force. 14:00 hours. German High Command. 6th Panzer Army. Dietrich stands over a map, the lines of fatigue etched deep into his face. Officers report in grim tones. Kampfgruppe paper is cut off from fuel. Ammunition low. Enemy reinforcements arriving in strength. The northern corridor is collapsing. Dietrich's fists clench. Hitler believes paper can still reach the Meuse. An aide adds quietly. Dietrich slams his palm on the table. Hitler believes in miracles. I need fuel. I need mobility. I need the damn roads cleared. Manschufel, standing in the corner, speaks softly. There are no more miracles left. His words fall like stones into the cold silence. Outside, the wind rattles the flimsy walls of the command hut, as if nature itself were whispering the truth. The offensive is dying. 17:20 hours. La Glise paper's column, now a fraction of its former strength, limps in a La Glise, snow blowing sideways as the last light of day bleeds out across the hills. The men dismount in silence. They know the truth without needing to hear it. They are isolated, surrounded, low on food, fuel, ammunition, and hope. Paper gathers his officers inside a small church lit by flickering lanterns. One of them, a young Hauptsturmführer, speaks first. Sir, what are your orders now? Paper looks around the room, at the weary eyes, the soot-stained faces, the men who believed they were the tip of a spear aimed at Antwerp. Now they were trapped. We hold, Paper says at last. We hold until we can break out. He doesn't say the rest, if they can break out, because Paper knows the noose is tightening and the Reich's final gamble is turning into a death sentence. 21:03 hours. Night falls over La Glise, the temperature plummets. Snow blankets the ruined village in a silent, suffocating shroud. American forces tighten their encirclement. Artillery thumps in the distance. Searchlights sweep through the dark. Paper walks alone through the streets, boots crunching in the snow, the weight of the entire failed offensive pressing down on him. He once believed he commanded a spear that would pierce the Allied lines. Now he commands an island, surrounded by enemies on all sides, and in the cold, starless night, he finally sees it clearly. Hitler's plan was never achievable. The Ardennes offensive was lost the moment it began, and every man under his command will pay the price for that delusion. The spearhead is broken. The corridor is collapsing. The dream of reaching the Meuse is gone. The Reich's final gamble is bleeding out in the cold, one burning vehicle at a time. December 22nd, 1944, south of Mannheim, Belgium. 03:47 hours. The forest is black and silent, except for the dull hum of distant artillery. A light snow falls through the pines, settling like ash upon the helmets of German grenadiers trudging westward in exhausted columns. But they're not advancing anymore. They're searching for a way out. That a young lieutenant of the 560th Volksgrenadier Division stumbles through the drifts, breath rasping in the cold air, boots soaked, rifle hanging limply at his side. His platoon is reduced to half its strength. They carry the wounded on improvised sleds made from broken doors. Behind him, a sergeant mutters, "Is this still the attack?" The lieutenant doesn't answer, because he knows, even if he isn't allowed to say it, that the attack has ended for them. They're no longer part of a grand, sweeping offensive. They're stragglers in a fading dream. Moving through a forest that has swallowed whole divisions, the flare rises in the distance, casting ghostly white light through the trees. A moment later, the rumble of American tanks echoes across the hills. The noose is tightening around the German salient, and somewhere in the dark, the generals who orchestrated this gamble are staring at maps that no longer resemble reality. 06:10 hours. 6th Panzer Army Command Hut. Blankenheim area. A generator sputters outside, casting intermittent light through the frozen canvas walls. Inside, the air is thick with cigarette smoke, cold breath, and dread. Dietrich stands at the head of a cluttered table, hands planted firmly on either side of a map littered with pushpins and scribbled notes. The lines meant to represent German advances now look like scars. A staff officer reads updates from a trembling sheet of paper. American counterattacks from the north and south are growing stronger. Paper is encircled. The 12th SS can't break through to him. The third Fallschirmjäger reports, "Enough." Dietrich snaps. He straightens slowly, his large frame casting a shadow across the lantern light. His voice drops to a gravelly whisper, bitter with realization. He wanted Antwerp, and now we can't even reach Trewapont. The headquarters falls silent. For the first time since the offensive began, no one pretends success is still possible. Not even the most fanatical among them. Manchufel enters, brushing snow from his overcoat, eyes red from lack of sleep. He quietly approaches Dietrich. "They're lying to Hitler again," he says. "Reports say we're still pushing toward the Meuse." Dietrich scoffs. "Pushing? We're drowning." Their eyes meet. Two veteran commanders of the Eastern Front, men who survived the worst the war could offer, now watching their last throw of the dice melt in front of them. Finally, Manchufel speaks the words no general dare say near Hitler's inner circle. "We've failed." Dietrich doesn't argue. He simply exhales and looks down at the map, the ink-stained artifact of a plan that was doomed before the first shell was fired. 09:25 hours. American lines east of Dinante. Column of U.S. Sherman tanks waits along a snowy roadside, engines idling, crews stamping their feet in the cold that a captain passes along the line. "Listen up. This is it. Counterattack orders confirmed. We push east. Hard." The tank crews exchange glances. They know what this means. The Germans won't be breaking through to the Meuse. Now the Americans are coming, and they will smash the German corridor from both sides, crushing the Bulge before it can deepen. Inside one of the tanks, a gunner whispers to his driver, "Feels like we've got the bastards on the ropes." The driver nods. "Snow's stopping them more than we are." The men chuckle. But they also know what the Germans don't realize yet. The Allied supply machine is roaring to life behind them. Fuel trucks, ammunition convoys, replacement battalions, fresh armor rolling up from Luxembourg. The Americans are no longer reacting. They're preparing to finish this. 12:50 hours. Lagleys, Pebblestone Church basement paper stands before his officers, a lantern flickering at his back. The air is thick with sweat, smoke, and the metallic tang of fear. "We're out of fuel," one Hauptmann reports. "Tanks can't move." "Then we hold the high ground," Paper replies. "But the Americans, I said we hold." His voice is hard, but his eyes betray him. He knows they cannot hold forever. They can barely hold for hours. Outside, American artillery begins a slow, deliberate barrage. Each impact sends dust drifting from the rafters above. A junior officer approaches, trembling slightly. "Sir, permission to ask, what is the objective now?" Paper stares at him. For the first time, he has no answer. The objective was Antwerp. Then it became the Meuse. Then it became Stomont. Then survival to La Galice. Now, escape, that if possible, if not. He clenches his fists. "Prepare positions," he says. "We fight until ordered otherwise." But no order is coming. The telephone lines are dead. The radio is mostly static. And Paper knows the 6th Panzer Army no longer has the strength to reach him, but he is alone. His men are alone, and the great offensive is no longer a spear. It is a broken fragment grasped tightly in the fist of a trapped battalion commander. 15:30 hours. Rundstedt's headquarters. Ziegenberg Castle Inn, a cold stone chamber lit by tall windows. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, overall commander of the Western Front, stands with his back to a fireplace, arms folded behind him as he listens to the latest reports. St. Vith has fallen, but too late. Paper is surrounded. The Meuse is unreachable. The Allies are massing for counterattack. Finally, Rundstedt exhales and mutters the phrase that will echo across history. "This is madness." His chief of staff clears his throat. "Shall we recommend withdrawal to the West Wall?" Rundstedt closes his eyes. He knows what that means. It means admitting failure. It means defying Hitler. It means acknowledging that Germany cannot win the war. Not here, not now, not ever again. Slowly, he nods. "Yes," he says. "Draft it." The staff officers exchange uncertain glances. Rundstedt speaks more firmly. "Draft it. And send it." He pauses, then adds with quiet bitterness. Maybe the Führer will listen to reality for once. But he knows the truth. Hitler will do the opposite. Hitler will demand they push harder. Hitler will insist victory is still possible. Hitler will order them to stay, to attack, to bleed. And this refusal, this blindness, will doom tens of thousands more. 19:00 hours. American counterattack begins. The ground shakes as U.S. artillery erupts in a rolling barrage across the German salient. Hundreds of guns coordinate in perfect rhythm. 105s, 155s, long-range heavies firing from the rear. The shelling doesn't just signal a counterattack. The IT signals the end of the German dream. American tanks surge forward. Infantry sweep through shattered forests. German lines, already thin, frozen, and exhausted, begin to crack. And as the sky glows with muzzle flashes and the snow churns under advancing treads, the final, undeniable truth sweeps through German headquarters like a cold wind. The Ardennes offensive will not just fail, the IT will collapse. And it will take the German army with it. The offensive has turned. The counterblow has begun. And Hitler's generals now face the bitter realization they feared from the start. This was the final gamble, and they have already lost. January 14th, 1945. Outskirts of Houffalize, Belgium. Snow drifts in sideways sheets, carried by a brutal wind that bites through wool, canvas, and steel alike. The last remnants of German Kampfgruppen retreat through the wreckage of what was once a narrow forest road, now churned into a frozen graveyard of burnt-out half-tracks, overturned preferred carts, and the twisted remains of a Panther turret blown clear off its hull. Oberstleutnant Hans-Joachim Bremer, his greatcoat stiff with frozen sweat, stands hunched beside a disabled SD, KFC 251. The engine block is cracked. The fuel tank is dry, and the tracks have frozen into the mud. Behind him, a dozen surviving grenadiers await orders that no longer matter. Far beyond the tree line, the dull rumble of American artillery rolls like a distant storm. Closer still, the low mechanical snarl of tank engines. Not German. Not anymore. Sherman's. Bremer presses his back against the ruined half-track and exhales a plume of white vapor. "This was supposed to be our victory," he mutters. "One final blow." Nobody answers. They don't need to. Everyone here knows the truth. The Ardennes offensive is dead. A few kilometers south, U.S. 7 Corps grinds forward. The road's now clear enough for armor to push through without fear of ambush. The 2nd Armored Division, Hell on Wheels, churns steadily toward Houffalize, linking up with the British north of the salient. What had been Germany's spearhead is now an open, bleeding wound. Inside the command half-track of the 83rd Infantry Division, Captain Willard Kane studies the shifting front lines on a frost-covered map spread across his lap. "They're falling back everywhere," he says, tapping the Bulge's shrinking outline. "Cut off their escape routes, and the whole pocket collapses." Beside him, a young sergeant nods grimly. "They fought like hell, sir, but they pushed too far with too little." Kane glances out the side flap. The forest is littered with discarded German equipment. Helmets, ammunition tins, torn Zeltbohnen, and rifles half covered in snow. Signs of a force no longer retreating in formation, but fleeing in fragments. Desperate, Kane says softly. They gambled everything. Meanwhile, inside Führer headquarters at the Adlerhorst, Hitler refuses to accept that the offensive has failed. Maps lie scattered across the table, their red arrows fading under the glow of harsh overhead lamps. Walther Model stands stiffly at attention, mud still clinging to the cuffs of his coat. Physical proof that he has returned from the collapsing front. Hitler's voice slices across the room. Reinforcements will be found. The offensive will resume. Model's jaw tightens. "My Führer, there are no reinforcements." Hitler slams a fist into the map table, rattling ink bottles and pencils, then scrape the replacement from the depots. "Transfer divisions from the east." Model's eyes flick to Jodl, then back to Hitler. The east is collapsing as well. "We are holding on by thread and frost, nothing more." For a moment, silence. Hitler turns away, staring at the massive Ardennes map pinned to the wall. The same map whose proud red arrows had once symbolized the thrust toward Antwerp. Now, They represent nothing but a delusion, a failure no general dares to speak of. But the room feels it. And so does he. Back near Hofelize, Bremer's grenadiers drag what remains of their gear into a shallow ditch. Their breath hangs in the air like drifting ghosts that a runner arrives, stumbling down the icy slope. Herr Oberstleutnant, he pants. Radio message from Corps. We are to withdraw east. New defensive line forming. Bremer nods. He expected as much, but the runner isn't finished. There is more, sir. We are ordered to destroy all equipment that cannot be moved. Bremer looks back at the crippled half-track, the vehicle that had carried his men through Normandy, Aachen, the Hurtgen Forest, and into this doomed offensive. The machine is more than metal. It is memory. He places a gloved hand on the cold armor, then turns away. Very well, he says. Set the charges. Minutes later, a dull, concussive thud echoes through the trees. A plume of black smoke rises into the white sky, the past destroyed by necessity, and the future swallowed by inevitability. American columns tighten the vise. From the north, the British XXX Corps pushes south with steady, relentless pressure. From the south, U.S. 3 Corps hammer upward. The once wide German salient narrows by the hour. Inside a forward U.S. command tent near Noville, Brigadier General James Gavin leans over a radio operator's shoulder as updates stream in. Enemy withdrawing east, enemy abandoning vehicles, multiple units requesting surrender corridors. Gavin steps back, arms crossed. They're breaking, he says. Not reorganizing, breaking. A major enters the tent carrying a stack of reconnaissance photos, the edges curled from the cold. Sir, Air Recon confirms it. Massive movement east. Looks like they're trying to pull what's left of the 2nd Panzer Division back across the Our River. Gavin scans the photos, long columns of men on foot, tanks left behind, horse-drawn artillery limping through the snow. He sets the photos down. Then let's make sure they don't succeed. Night falls over the Ardennes like a frozen curtain. Bremer and his remaining men march toward the east, their boots crunching rhythmically in the snow. The wind is merciless. The forest feels endless. Every few kilometers they pass abandoned vehicles. A Tiger II with its engine seized. A Stoogie 3 buried to its casemate in snow. A line of Opel Blitz trucks with shattered axles. Soldiers who once believed they were advancing toward Antwerp now trudge deeper into darkness, knowing they are retreating toward defeat. Bremer hears the distant thunder of artillery again, but this time it is behind them, growing louder, creeping closer. His men glance back nervously. Sir, one asks, will we make it to the new line? Bremer does not answer. He does not know. An officer in the Ardennes de Dawn, January 15th. The American and British pincers finally meet. Hofelize falls. The Bulge is crushed, and the last vestiges of German hope, the last belief that the Ardennes might turn the tide, die beneath the treads of U.S. Sherman tanks clattering through the wreckage of once proud panzer formations. The fog lifts. The truth does not. Germany's final offensive has failed, spectacularly, irreversibly, catastrophically. But for Bremer, and for thousands like him still struggling to escape encirclement, the story is not over. Not yet. January 18th, 1945. Eastern bank of the Our River. Near Vianden, a pale winter sun struggles through a sheet of thick, colorless clouds as Oberstleutnant Hans-Joachim Bremer limps with the remnants of his platoon across the frozen shallows of the river. Their uniforms are soaked, heavy, and stiffening rapidly in the cold. Behind them, the last makeshift bridge, nothing more than logs and scavenged planks, collapses into the icy current with a groaning crack. Bremer turns to look. The Ardennes lies behind him now, a graveyard of ambition, metal, and men. Smoke still rises from the western ridge, where American artillery continues pounding German positions even as the front retracts toward the Reich's borders. For a moment, he stands motionless, breath forming white halos around his face that he feels, more than anyone in Berlin is willing to admit, that this crossing is not a withdrawal. It is an ending. Inside the 5th Panzer Army Rear Command dugout near Prum, General Otto von Manschufel sits hunched over a half-burned map, its edges curled from the stove's heat. Officers crowd the dim bunker, their faces hollowed by exhaustion and weeks of failure. The runner enters, boots caked with frozen mud. Field Marshal Model is requesting a status update. Her general, Manchufel, doesn't look up. Tell him the truth, he mutters. Tell him what he already knows. The army is finished. The room falls silent. One officer dares to whisper. Should we inform the Fuhrer? Manchufel raises his eyes slowly. Eyes that have seen the Eastern Front, the collapse of Army Group Center, the encirclement at Courland, and now this catastrophe. Hitler, he says, does not want the truth. The men say nothing because they understand. Meanwhile, at a forward American airfield near Liège, the ground is alive with motion. P-47 Thunderbolts sit lined up on the frost-covered tarmac, their canopies clouded with mist. Mechanics refuel and rearm them with bombs and rockets, preparing for the next strike deep into retreating German columns. Inside the operations tent, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Fox Murdoch traces arc after arc across a map of the Eifel region. Target priority, he says, tapping a pencil on the board, is anything that moves east. Trucks, half-tracks, even horse-drawn carts. The German retreat is our chance to cripple what's left of their armor. A younger pilot adjusts his headset nervously. Sir, some of those columns are mostly infantry on foot. Murdoch pauses, then nods grimly. This is war, son. If they reach the Rhine intact, we'll pay for it later. The pilots file out in silence. Moments later, engines roar to life, shaking the ground. Snow swirls and spirals under the propellers. The sky fills with thunder and steel. This U.S. armor secures the last pockets west of the hour. Brigadier General James Gavin tours the shattered remains of the 2nd Panzer Division's retreat route. Shermans crawl forward through abandoned German positions, their tracks grinding over broken helmets, shell casings, and the blackened skeletons of vehicles. A lieutenant points toward a destroyed Panther tank embedded nose first into a ditch. They tried to tow it, the lieutenant says. Look, they smashed the transmission trying to haul it up the slope. Ran out of time. Gavin studies the wreck. The once feared German panzers now look like relics. Lions starved to bones, devoured by the very winter that once sheltered them. A cold gust sweeps across the field, carrying the faint smell of fuel and burnt rubber. Gavin pulls his collar tight. This is what a final gamble looks like when it fails. Back east, Hitler refuses to acknowledge any of the Adlerhorst bunker. He paces, muttering under his breath as generals stand rigid along the wall. His eyes flick wildly from chart to chart, as if searching for an alternate reality hidden between the penciled arrows. Finally, he slams a trembling hand on the map table. The offensive would have succeeded, he growls, if my orders had been followed without hesitation. Keitel clears his throat nervously. My Führer, the armies require rest. They have silence. Hitler snaps. We will prepare another counteroffensive. In the west first, then the east. The Reich still has reserves. Model, exhausted and mud-stained from the front, takes one step forward. My Führer, there are no reserves. The words hang in the air like a funeral bell. Hitler stares at him. Model does not blink. For the first time, Hitler's voice falters. You mean we cannot fight another offensive? Model answers quietly. We can barely hold the line. By January 20th, Bremer's unit has dwindled to fewer than 20 men. They move through the narrow valleys east of the Our, passing small villages where civilians huddle inside ruined houses, their windows covered with blankets to block the nightly drafts, and a barn outside Skoniken. Bremer finally calls halt. The men collapse onto piles of hay, boots steaming, hands shaking uncontrollably from cold and exhaustion. One soldier, barely 17, asks, Herr Oberstleutnant, was all of this for? Nothing. Bremer sits beneath a shattered window frame. Watching snow drift through the cracks, he thinks of the officers' briefings in early December. The promise that this offensive would split the Allies, force negotiations, reverse the war. He thinks of the fuel shortages they all ignored, the paper-thin intelligence reports, the blind faith, and the silence they all maintained. Bremer answers only after a long pause. I don't know, he says. But I suspect we were the last ones to see the truth. In the coming days, Allied forces push to the very edge of the Reich. The Ardennes is secured. The Bulge erased. The German army, once capable of lightning war, stumbles back across its own borders, leaving behind over 60,000 casualties, irreplaceable armor, spent fuel, and the last illusions of victory. New Allied offensives loom on the horizon. Patton's Third Army prepares to strike deeper into Germany. The British ready their final push toward the Rhine. The Soviet Red Army masses in the east, waiting for winter roads to harden. Germany is surrounded, its armies shattered, its Luftwaffe broken, its last gamble, the Ardennes, exposed as the result of desperation, denial, and delusion. January 25th, 1945. Berlin, a courier rushes down the marble hallways of the Reich Chancellery, boots clicking sharply with each step. He pushes through heavy wooden doors into the briefing room where Hitler sits slumped in his chair. He hands the message to Jodl, who reads it silently. Then, with a heavy breath, he speaks. My Führer, Army Group B reports that the Ardennes offensive has officially ended. Our forces have withdrawn to their original positions. The words fall like stones. Hitler says nothing, because there is nothing left to say. Every general in the room understands the meaning behind the report. Germany will never go on the offensive again. Not in the West, not in the East, not anywhere. The war is now a countdown, and the world knows it. Bremer, freezing in the ruins of a farmhouse near Prum, receives the same radio message before dawn. He turns the dial slowly, listening again as the transmission repeats. Operation Wacht am Rhein. Terminated. All units revert to defensive posture east of the hour. Bremer closes his eyes. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders loosen, not in relief, but in resignation. It's over, he whispers. Not the war, not yet, but the belief that Germany still held a chance. The Ardennes was the final throw of the dice, and it had come up empty. Bremer lowers the radio handset. Outside, the snow continues falling, soft, silent, indifferent, covering the footprints of a retreating army and the remnants of a nation's last futile gamble.